Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers for, well, I'm going to call it another Gleban Friday because, well, we're starting out on Gleban because I'm going to talk to you today about the agricultural sciences and what's happening with them once they leave this planet. So we've already talked about how they're being shipped up to the rockets over here and then shipped out up to the spaceship and taken back over to Norvis. But what happens over there, that is going to be the interesting part. And that's a really well-timed rocket launch, I'm quite impressed. Over on Norvis, we have our downstream system, and that's the landing pad over here, which is connected up to various intercombinators, which are telling it what to ask for. And we're, as you've seen before, we've got a system over here that's requesting up to 40,000 of each of the science packs, but the agricultural science is a little bit different. And that's because we're using the ice boxes in order to keep it nice and fresh. And slightly awkwardly, the ice boxes are not logistics chests, so that means you can't request stuff to be brought to them, and you can't request stuff to be taken from them either. And so Tristan has set up a system where he's connecting them up to these blue chests next to them. And the blue chests have their requests set from the combinator at the top here. So we're always requesting 100 dry ice into each one. So there'll be a stockpile kept in there, and that's connected to all of the chests around here. And there's another request that's telling them to request 20 agricultural science packs. So in an attempt to bring the science packs out from the landing pad when they appear and make sure they get fed out into these chests. On top of that, to make sure that we always have the right things in the chests, there's an additional combinator at the top here, which is saying minus 50 dry ice and minus 2,000 agricultural science pack, and that's being fed down the green cable to all of the inserters. And then each one of the chests is connected by a red cable, and if I turn on the circuit visualizer mod by _1024, which is part of the Planetary Pioneers mod pack and linked in the description, then when I mouse over it like that, you'll be able to see the cables a lot more obviously. From this inserter, you can see the green cable going from the combinator to all of the inserters, and then a red cable going from the inserter to the chest. And that means that we're monitoring what's in this chest, and at the moment there's 1,500 agricultural science packs, and the ice has just run out. So we seem to have a bit of a shortage of ice over here at the moment, which is unfortunate. But the idea is that those are added, the numbers in there are added to the negative numbers that are coming out of here. And that means if there's insufficient science packs or insufficient ice in this chest, and because that's fed into here and it's then blacklisting, that means when you get enough of that thing through into the chest here, then it'll stop trying to pass it through. Now at the moment it's not working because we have a bit of a shortage of science. I say a shortage of science, there's 1,500 in here, that's not too bad. But there's a definite shortage of ice over here, so sooner or later some of that will be brought over. It'll be brought over to here, and then we've got a blacklist set to absolutely nothing at the moment because we reckon we're currently short of everything, but when some ice arrives we can pass that over until there is 50 ice in the chest over here, and then it'll zero, and then that'll become a positive number. It'll go into here and it'll be blacklisted, so we won't pass any more ice across. And so the idea behind that is that we should always have about 50 dry ice and about 2,000 agricultural science packs in each one of these chests, because each one, as you can see as I scroll down here, is connected up in exactly the same way. And then once we hit those numbers, then the system will stop passing them over, and it will maintain that it stockpiles of dry ice in the chests over here, but it won't pull in any more than we're already asking for. With all of the other science packs, when a train pulls in here and goes, "Hello, I would like to have some Vulcanus science please," it sets up requests on these blue chests here, and then that will all be requested from the boxes up here that contain the Vulcanus science. They'll be flown down by bot, put into the blue chest, put into the train, and the train will take them away. Great. However, as previously mentioned, that won't work with the Gleban sciences because they're in the ice boxes, which are not logistics chests. And so that means in order to get them brought down here, we need to pass them over into these yellow chests over here. And that's done by sending a signal up from the station. When some Gleban science is requested, then we'll start passing through from here. So this is set to pass through when we get a green square through, and that's triggered by a signal coming up from the station, as I said. And so let's see the system in action. One of the science parks is now requesting some more agricultural science to be brought over, and so a train will arrive at the station. When the train arrives, we'll have a frenzy of all of the agricultural science packs being passed over into the yellow chests in the middle, and then brought down to the station by a bot like this, and then loaded into the train. It'll take a moment or two for all the packs to be loaded into the train, so we'll just be a little bit patient here. But once the train is filled up and heads off, the bots will then tidy all the science packs out from the yellow chests in the middle back to the original blue chests, which means they can then be passed through into the ice boxes where they were waiting before, which means they'll be kept fresh. It is perhaps a little bit silly that we transfer all of the science packs out of the ice boxes into the yellow chests in the middle, just to then pass them back across to the blue chests on the outside. It does keep the bots a little bit overworked, but then never mind, I suppose that's not actually a serious problem. And eventually, after a certain amount of bot frenzy, all of the science packs have been put back in the ice chests where they belong, and we can now wait for the next train to come in and demand some. And now we're down to just having the bots bringing in extra ice to make sure that everything stays fresh. And so you say, well, all that sounds very complicated, but what's the point? Well, the point is that these ice boxes are capable of maintaining the freshness level on the agricultural science packs. So if we take a look in this box here, you'll see that all of these, well, in theory, all of these would be at 50%, because the way it's supposed to work is that as long as there's ice in one of these chests, then it will gradually get used up, and as it does so, it'll maintain all of these at a freshness of 50%. However, there is a bug in the scripts that the game uses in order to sort that out. So if there are any ice boxes anywhere on the planet, or possibly anywhere in the solar system, I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but if there are any ice boxes out there that don't have any ice in, then the script gets that ice box and breaks, and then stops affecting other ones properly. However, we've had another load of dry ice come in from a train, so that's been dropped off over here, and is now all being swooped over by the bots. And so that means all of our boxes now have some dry ice in. So if we have a look in this one again, you can see that this is gradually ticking down over time like that, and then the inserter puts another 12 in, but it's going down quite quickly. But if we look at all of these, you can see now that these are all being held at 50%. And the way this works is the script runs through and it looks at them all, and if the freshness is less than 50%, then it nudges it up by a couple of percent or 3%, something like that. I don't know exactly how much it does it by, maybe 0.3% actually looking at that. But anyway, every so often it'll go through, it'll take out some dry ice and it'll add some freshness on to anything that is less than 50%, with the end result of keeping them all at about 50%. So this means if you bring in a load of science packs from Gleban and then put them into your ice boxes, as long as the ice is kept supplied, it doesn't matter whether they came in at 20% freshness, they'll be brought back up to 50, or if they come in at 70% freshness, they'll gradually decay down to 50%. So in a way, these things are both good and bad, because they will make sure that your stuff never degrades below 50%, but also it probably won't ever go above 50% if you store it in these. So it's still worthwhile looking into trying to transport stuff around as quickly as possible, and maybe have it arrive at perhaps 90% if you're really, really on it, because then you'll still get 90% of the science out of it. However, if you just rely on the ice boxes, then you can still get 50% of the science out of your science packs, which is still reasonably good. And so now it's more or less idle. You can see them gradually putting more ice into the boxes to keep them running. So as I said earlier, when we need more agricultural science, a train will turn up here, it will grab some of it, and it will take it off to the science parks. And the science parks are way off over here in the far distant reaches of the base. It'll get dropped off here like every other science pack does, and it'll run down the belts. And in here we've got another storage system for science packs. And this will look fairly similar for all of these ones. As you can see, we've got the brown and the red and the space and the military and so on, all being stored up in stacks and stacks of chests. And this, you've seen this before. You all understand how this works. However, Tristan has upgraded it now to use stack inserters, which means that as he unloads onto the belt here, we've got a significantly higher capacity. We can put a lot more science packs down the belts over here. At the moment, that doesn't really matter because the belts aren't very full, but in the future, as we get more science packs through, or potentially as we put more labs in and then want to have more science packs running through to keep more labs going, we may well end up putting more and more and more onto these belts. We'll see how that goes. However, the thing I've come over to look at the moment is that yes, we've got more ice chests over here. So we've got all these ice boxes down here working in exactly the same way as these ones are. So we put the science packs in at the top, and then they rattle down through them, and then they're taken out to the bottom and put onto the belts to be taken around to have science done with them. Lovely. The difference is though that while all of these ones can just merrily sit in their boxes because they don't have any sort of spoilage on them, the agricultural ones have to be maintained. And so we've got a system set up over here that is loading dry ice from these belts into the ice boxes to once again keep them at a quantity of ice. And we have a combinator set at the bottom down here, which is saying always try and have 1,000 in each box, just to make sure we don't run out, because we don't want to run out. That would be embarrassing, and everything will go a bit stale. And then that once again is keeping all of these science packs at a nice neat 50%, keeping them at that level of freshness. And so they'll then be taken out from here at 50%, dropped onto the belt. They'll go around like this, and yes, they'll degrade a little bit as they go around. And if we're not actually doing agricultural science, they'll come out the other end like this, degraded a little bit further. And so unlike the other science packs, which are just passed around back onto the belt to go back around the system again, the agricultural science packs are pulled out here and they go onto another belt that brings them up here and puts them back into the sorting system, which means they'll go back in at the boxes at the top, and then they'll gradually work their way down through here. But because they're going to sit in ice boxes for a little while, they will have their freshness bumped back up again to 50%. So in theory, we should always get science packs coming out here at the bottom at 50%. And I wonder, has this been... Okay, this has been set up to take out spoiled first. I don't know whether that's better or worse, to be honest. I think we should given the ice boxes, we should probably be taking out freshest first. So I'll point that out to Tristan, because that way, if any of them do sneak through at greater than 50%, then we'll use them up first. But if any of them are lower than 50%, we can leave them in the chest to recover their freshness back up to 50% before taking them out to use them. You may have noticed there's a certain amount of spoilage in these chests. That shouldn't happen. However, we had some issues earlier with the aforementioned bug where the ice chests don't work, and I think we also ran out of dry ice at one point as well. So we've ended up with a bit of spoilage in here. It will, in theory, eventually find its way out onto the belt down here to be dumped onto the science belt, and then eventually be pulled out over here and put into a purple chest and taken away to goodness knows where. So this isn't the end of the world. It will be tidied up, but it's a little bit of a mess at the moment. But never mind, it will, as I say, be sorted out. Unlocking the agricultural science packs has allowed us to develop some powers that some may call unnatural, and that has allowed us to do various biter-related technologies, such as the capture rocket. And these things seem kinda cruel, because with the capture bot rockets, I can drop these things onto biter spawners, and after a moment or two of fairly normal them running more or less as normal and still carrying on spawning in biters who don't seem to like what we're doing to their spawners, they will gradually attempt to take them over. These things are look a little bit nasty. They're big injecty things that are squirting who knows what into the top of the biter spawners. But eventually they will get taken over like this one has over here, and they will get very, very hungry. But they become captive biter spawners which belong to me. And that means they stop producing additional biters, and they start producing, well, if we feed them, they will start producing biter eggs instead. Now these ones I'm going to just abandon because I don't have anything to do with them at the moment. I didn't bring any food down for them at the moment, and they're just going to gradually lose health, as you can see out there, until eventually they get down to 0 and they'll turn back into normal spawners again. But I think that was a good demonstration of how the capture rockets work. And so, well, we needed to get some biter nests, and we did that by, well, Tristan came in secret because he's played Space Age before, so he knows a little bit about how these technologies work, and so he came in secret without really telling anyone and turned off the artillery in the sort of the bottom area of the factory down here. And that meant that we allowed the biters to expand a bit until they built up to over here, and they put down these 4 spawners here. And then after that, Sophia was then able to go in and capture them. And these ones fitted quite nicely into a city block, so that we picked on this area to choose to capture. And he's grabbed these 4 and put up some defences around them just in case they produce any eggs that do end up hatching, because that would be a little bit unfortunate. And then captured the spawners down here and started to feed them, which means they're then eventually going to start producing resources. Feeding them in this context means giving them bioflux. Yes, the stuff we're making over on Gleban from the Yamako and the jelly nut. And so that's being brought in by train to up here, and then dumped down belt along here, and then passed round and round and round as much as necessary, and then put into some ice chests over here. And the ice chests are also capable of keeping the bioflux at 50% freshness as well, so they're very handy for that. And we've got some dry ice coming in and bimbling around here as well, so we should in theory have a good steady supply of that. Same thing's happening over here and down here. That can then be fed into the captive spawners, so we have some bioflux in here. They're using that basically as a fuel. It's keeping them fed, and then they generate biter eggs like that. The biter eggs are then unloaded by an inserter here, dropped onto a belt, and then they're taken over to a station. They're being loaded over into the station. Once again, the station also has ice chests in it, and we're keeping those full of ice and full of biter eggs. And then the contents of the station is being sent off to LTN in the normal way. So in theory, when we need biter eggs anywhere in the factory, we can call for them. A train will turn up over here, it'll fill up with biter eggs, and it'll head off again. We also have a system set up over here to monitor how many eggs we have, and whenever it's less than 3.2 thousand, which will easily fit into the station, we will then have the inserters over here be active and unloading the eggs. Conveniently, eggs don't spoil when they're inside a biter spawner, so until they've been pulled out and put onto the belt, they will stay at 100% freshness, which means there's no risk of them hatching while they're inside the spawners. We only have to deal with keeping them fresh once they've left and headed down here and gone into the storage systems over here. This is a good example of how things will gradually lose freshness even in an ice box if they're over 50%, even if there's ice in there. So you can see the ice ticking away next to it there. It's ticking away gently as it gets used up, but the eggs are still decaying very, very slowly. And it would be nice if having them in an icebox kept them at the freshness level that they were at, but didn't have them increase again. It feels a bit like if I had a load of chicken in the kitchen and I left it on the side for a little while and it got down to sort of 20% freshness and was starting to go a bit funny. If I then put it back in the fridge, it would come back up to 50% freshness and be absolutely fine again, which of course is not how fridges work, as we all know. But I imagine with the way the game is coded and written and so on, there's a limit to what you can do with the scripts, and so this is a sensible method of keeping it more or less functional. We have once again used the per chest requests up here. So each chest would like to have 210 biter eggs and 60 dry ice. And these are negative numbers because then if you add them to the number of whatever is in the chest, and then pass that into the inserter and blacklist it, you'll get the correct thing set up on here and it will just work. It's very, very neat, works nicely, and you don't have to worry about putting in arithmetic combinations in here for every single one. The other way to do it would be to have the number you want to have in here as positive numbers, and then subtract whatever's in the chest. That will tell you what you're still waiting for, and then feed that into the inserter as a positive number and use that for whitelisting. But that's more complicated, requires an additional accumulator for every single inserter, and therefore this method, doing it this way around, is much, much neater and much, much nicer. So you'll see that we tend to use that quite a lot where we can, especially when a signal is needed repeatedly for lots and lots of different inserters, and each one has to work off a different chest. I think that's pretty much everything to say about this station. You'll notice that the eggs are coming in on one side of the belt and the dry ice on the other, and that means we can have two inputs to each one of these chests without having to do any funny business with the inserters, so that's quite nice. Similarly over here we've got the dry ice on one side and the bioflux on the other. We've got a cunning system up here in the station that's telling it to unload dry ice whenever there's less than a certain amount on this belt over here, and that makes sure there's always room for it to pour out and then go wherever, including some of it going down here to make sure we don't run out in the bottom part, but always making sure there's also room to unload the bioflux from the station up here when the system down here requires some bioflux. I feel like there's rather a lot of bioflux on this belt, and that some of it is going to be going off rather than being kept in the ice boxes, but I guess, well, the alternative I suppose would be to keep a lot more in the ice boxes, and that would work, and then have none on the belt here, and then send signals out from the ice boxes up here to tell this when to unload. The only problem is that it could get a little bit out of whack, and we could end up with all of the bioflux in two of the boxes and one of them being empty. But you could set up signals that says from here unload whenever any one of these is below 10 or below 20 or whatever number you pick, and then have them pick up to a larger number. You would have to have a limit set though, otherwise this one would get all of the bioflux, and it would never make it pass down to here, or it would just fill up and jam and you wouldn't have any room for ice. So a little bit of care would be required there, but I think it could probably be made to be slightly more efficient with the bioflux. Whether it's worth it for something that's that cheap, it is literally just made out of fruit, is open to debate, but it does have to be transported over from Gleban, so there's a certain amount of extra handling required there, so maybe it would be worth tweaking it like that. And so why, you say, why on earth would you want to produce all of these biter eggs? It just sounds like an accident waiting to happen. At some point they're going to hatch, they're going to eat half your base, and then you're going to feel awfully silly. Well, yes, you're not wrong, but there are a few uses for them. So, they're being brought up to our general mall area over here, where they're then dropped off by a train in the same way that absolutely everything else is. They go into these purple chests, and then they can be taken off and put into general storage. But for biter eggs specifically, I think general storage is down here. Yes, we've got this one filtered deliberately to biter eggs. We've not bothered with filters for most of the other stuff, because it doesn't matter where we keep it. But down here, we've got this one filtered to biter eggs, so they'll all be brought down here and stored in this chest, because there's quite a lot of lasers and Tesla turrets around here, just to make sure that if any of these eggs do get any funny ideas, we'll be reasonably well protected from them. And if we take a look at these, you can see that these are all at about 70%, because we're actually getting through them quite quickly, so they're not having time to go any lower than that. And they do last for half an hour before they spoil, and when they spoil they turn into big biters, which is not ideal. But anyway, yes, so we've got these, we've got 20 minutes to use them all up, and use them up well, we're trying quite hard. So they will then get brought from the chest over here into this area, where they can then be made into tier 3 productivity modules. We're bringing in all of the things we need here. So we've got the red circuits, blue circuits, tier 2 productivity modules and biter eggs, because making the tier 3 productivity modules does indeed require all those things, including biter eggs. It's very, very strange, but you know, you kind of expect the productivity module 3 to be quite expensive, because they're really, really powerful. They give you a load of free stuff, and who doesn't like free stuff? So we want to have those. So yeah, make them expensive, make us require biter eggs, sure, why not? So those are being brought over, and we're making a quantity of tier 3 productivity modules. We've got 47 of them, that's not too bad, and then another 55 in this box over here. And we're also using them for making these labs over here. So these are the tier 2 labs, I suppose in a way, actually, these are tier 3 labs, because the steam science ones we gained from the Planetary Pioneers from Corundum, I want to say. I'm not sure if it's actually Corundum, but from somewhere else anyway. And these biolabs also require biter eggs, as well as capture bot rockets labs, refined concrete uranium, and that all puts together a biolab, which is very exciting, because the biolab, you can see halfway down there, has a 50% science pack drain. And that means every one of your science packs will last twice as long, which is quite nice. And it means, it does mean the agricultural science packs will last as long as a normal science pack would, so that's quite nice. Everything else will last twice as long, so that's really, really good. It means we can basically double our science rate without having to make any extra science packs at all. So I've been really looking forward to us getting this, and now we finally have unlocked it and managed to make a load. We've also got, as you'll notice in here, we've got the best quality modules money can buy at the moment, the best quality module we've got available, and that is in theory churning out some higher quality, one of them just went, some higher quality biolabs like these two rare ones in here. And then those are being taken away over to the science labs, and you might have noticed them earlier, or you might have just skimmed over them because I didn't point them out. But we have now upgraded to biolabs in both of our science parks. So all of these are biolabs, all of these are biolabs, and we're going through and gradually upgrading them to higher quality ones. So we've got a load of tier 2 biolabs down here. Over here we've got some tier 4s, some tier 3s, even some tier 2s down the bottom. So we're doing our best to churn through and get these up to as high a tier as we possibly can. We're also feeding in the best productivity modules we can. So up here you can see we've managed to get tier 4 productivity 3s all the way through here. That's quite impressive. So we've now got a 76% productivity bonus on there and the 50% science drain. So every science pack that goes into one of these is doing about 3.5 science packs worth of science, and that's really, really good. So at the moment we're getting 780 science per minute, but only spending about 220 science per minute on that. So that's really nice because, you know, who doesn't like free science? We don't actually get any additional productivity or reduced science pack drain from the epic biolabs here, but it does mean they run faster, and therefore we get more of a benefit from putting our absolute best modules into those first few machines. As you probably noticed, we are only using higher quality biolabs, but there aren't any common ones over there at all. But we only have a 15.2% chance of getting a quality one out of this machine whenever it runs. And so presumably there is a recycler somewhere in this area that is getting all of the common biolabs and smashing them up and turning them back into their source ingredients. I don't know where that is. This is the problem with bot malls. Somewhere there is probably a recycler, but I have no idea where it is. Maybe it's this one over here. Aha, it seems to be this one over here. Alright, okay, that wasn't too difficult to find. So it's bringing in both normal and uncommon ones because we've upgraded everything to at least uncommon. So we're still churning through trying to make tier 3 and tier 4s. So anything, that gets brought over here, gets recycled like that, and then we dump all the parts out into the purple chest. At least we do a quarter of the time when the system actually works, and well, there's a 25% chance of you actually getting back what you want. So it's not ideal, but it's trying and it's doing the quality churn a little bit. And so sometimes we'll get out the parts of a science lab like that. Okay, this time it's just giving us a biolab back. That's interesting. All right, maybe we don't get the components of a biolab back. A biolab is considered something that is indivisible. And if we take a look here, we can confirm that. So a biolab recycling, one biolab turns into 25% chance of a biolab. So we're not even getting anything better out of that. Now, it does have quality modules in there. So there is a 16% chance of a biolab that gets put in here coming out as a better biolab, in which case we will keep it and use it. But still, that's a 4% chance because there's a 25% chance of it coming out at all. And then there's a 16% chance stacked on top of that of it coming out as a better quality science lab than it went in as. So it's not great. The odds aren't great over here. But otherwise, if we didn't do this, then we would just become completely inundated with standard level biolabs that we just don't really know what to do with. Oh look, there's a tier 3 one's actually been made. So it's not completely wasteful. We are just churning through quite a lot of resources though in order to try and make these high tier biolabs. Whether it's worth it or not, it's hard to say, because you do only get a speed bonus out of them. But having a faster one does mean you effectively get more bang for your buck for your productivity modules that you put in there as well, so maybe it's kind of worth it. I did notice that we're also churning through quality modules here, trying to make better quality modules. Again, quite wasteful, but it does at least keep the system running and hopefully eventually will produce some useful modules, and maybe it'll all be worth it in the end. This is also keeping lots and lots of eggs flowing through, which helps us make sure these don't all hatch. So you see we've still got 12 minutes left on these, and there's less than one stack left, so we are churning through these pretty quickly. Certainly faster than we're making them, so I think we're going to need to upgrade that in a future stream. Given how fast we're using these eggs up, I guess trying to keep them fresher doesn't necessarily matter at the moment, but I think in the long run we're going to want to make a system over here that's similar to the one we're using over here for maintaining the agricultural science, in order to keep these eggs nice and fresh while we're waiting to use them, and then only take them out of an eggs box when they're ready to be taken over and made into a lab or made into a productivity module or whatever else they're being used for. If we go all the way, then we'd also have this blue chest feeding into an ice box in order to keep them fresh while we're waiting for them to go into one of these machines. That would, of course, be the ideal. Whether we'll actually get to that point or whether we'll just always be churning through the eggs fast enough that it doesn't matter, well, we shall see, and you'll find out in a future video or a future stream. And with that, I think that neatly covers all of the cruel things we're doing to biters at the moment, and how we're making the agricultural science, which we get from studying the pentapods and being cruel to them in turn. If you want to see what else we're doing to the poor little critters, come along and join us at 7:30 PM UK time on Monday, when we'll be doing another stream. We've got a bit more building up of things on Norvis to do, I think, before we go off to another planet, but I expect by the time this video's come out and you've seen it, we'll probably have gone off somewhere else. So come along and see where we've got to for the next one. And if you fancy giving the Planetary Pioneers mod a try yourself, you can grab the mod from the Factorio mod portal, install it in your game, and get the full set of planets and quality of life mods ready to start your own playthrough. If you do give it a try, come along and tell us how you're getting on the Discord, because it's always great to hear how other people are finding the game. I'll also be back on Wednesday where I'll be playing something else. I'm still currently, as of recording this, still working on finishing off Foundry, but they keep putting new content in there, and there's quite a lot of fun Xenotech stuff that I want to have a play with, so you never know, I might still be playing that when the video comes out as well. And if I'm not, I'll have started up another stream, so don't worry, there will still be a stream on Wednesday. These videos will be carry on coming out on Thursdays and Fridays, so please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of those. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.